Well, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me here. I may drive Georgia crazy because I may get up and wander around rather than just sit still. I've caused probably gray hair, which is better than, because I have no hair, so she's still better off than I am wherever I've left it here. How many of you are mostly from Gorham? And how many of you moved here recently? So, how many?
I've been here for 20 years.
How many of you lived here in Gorham for a long time? Okay, and all the rest of you have moved in from other locations? I know Tom. Tom and I grew up to the fitness room, him and his wife over the past year or so a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of wander out and try to give you my experiences here in Gorham. You folks may have some fond memories of your own and may remember many things that I've forgotten. So please weigh in or feel free to ask me any questions that you have along the way. I came down from Old Town. I started here in January of 1994. And I spent the previous 9 years as the city manager up in Old Town. When I got here, the population in Gorham was about 11,500. Okay, so keep that in mind. A couple of statistics I want to give you here is that from 1994 to about 2016, 22-year period, the population in Gorham increased about 46%. Okay. And during that same period of time, the town of Gorham accepted 98 new roads. Wow. So about 24 miles of brand new roads to take care of. So if any of you looked out your back window in recent years and said, oh, that field that there is no longer a field, or you've gone somewhere, only remember growing up and discovered that it's houses now and things like that, and you think we're growing fast, you're not incorrect. You're very correct here. We've grown very, very fast here along the way. When I came down here in '94, Gorham and Law, in fact, most of New England was just coming out of probably one of the worst recessions that the state of Maine had ever seen. Mostly fueled by a collapse in real estate prices. And the town of Gorham actually laid off the workforce at the time. Trucks were all very, very old. They spent more time in the shop being repaired than they did out on the road, actually taking care of the roads for us. And I worked over at the old municipal center, which is at the time was located down in Lower Main Street. It's now just been converted into our new fire station.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you can remember that, but that building was actually built in 1972, I believe, and everybody was over there. The town manager's office was there. If you wanted to pay your property taxes, the finance office was there. The town clerk was there. The planning department, the code department, police, fire and rescue. Everybody was in that building on the first floor. And up on the second floor was the superintendent of schools and all of the offices that went with the superintendent of schools. So we were all kind of crowded into that one building. And I started in January of 1994, and I could not get the heat in my office that winter above 60 degrees.
Pretty cool.
And so I sat there all winter, every day at my desk, just like this, wearing my winter jacket and my winter hat. And does anybody here know Jan LeBrecq? Okay,
Yeah.
so Jan LeBrecq is a wonderful lady who lives out in North Gorham. She was on the town council at the time, and I remember Jan coming in about twice every week because she was afraid I was just going to give up and go home and go back to Old Town. And I kept saying, no, I'm here. I'm here for the long haul. So it was an interesting winter. And also, I'm pretty sure, my memory's correct, that in the spring of 1994, the Gorham Times started being published. I think that's when it started. I kind of remember, and many of you may remember Martha Harris.
Yes.
Martha Harris, wonderful lady. She was taking photographs for the Gorham Times even back then, and I remember her getting my whole family out on the front doorstep in the summertime and putting us all together for a photograph for one of the earliest, I don't know if it was the first edition or not, one of the earliest editions of the Gorham Times. I started building a home over on Queen Street in March of that year, and in June, my family, after school finished up in Old Town, all moved down here, and into that exciting brand new house. My children were just ecstatic that it was going to be a new house, even though they didn't quite know what that meant. And then in the fall, my son started the 3rd grade, and my daughter started in 1st grade at the Narragansett School. And my son, now, in fact, both of those children up in Old Town had gone to a school called the Herbie Sargent School, and that was a kindergarten through 5th grade, so it had 6 grades in it. And the student population in that school was 125 students. So think about that for a second, because when they started over at the Narragansett School, that school had just 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Those were the only 3 grades that were there. It had 400 students. And I remember my son having to go in and decide which of these 7 different 3rd grade classes he was going to go into. And he was just overwhelmed, totally lost. Right from day one through most of that year, he had a very difficult transition trying to navigate, that much larger school. On the other hand, I can remember just as clearly as I'm sitting here right now, my wife walking up to the school bus stop that very first day, my daughter, who was coming out of the 1st grade, bouncing off the bus, bouncing across the road, and walking up to her, and she said, "So, how was your day?" And she just ecstatically said, "This is the best day of my life." And if you knew my daughter, it kind of stayed that way all through school. So we'd go, okay, 50%, that's not bad, we'll take it. One of the first things I did when I came down here was I went back, because up in Old Town, where I'd come down from, we would get rid of our 1 dump truck a year and buy a brand new. And so I went back to Old Town and said, "You're going to get rid of a dump truck, right?" And they said, "Yes." So I said, "We want to buy it." And so we bought a 7-year-old dump truck that the city of Old Town was getting rid of for $13,000, if I'm remembering it correctly. It brought it into our fleet. And at the time, all the employees were just so excited because they finally had a dump truck that was somewhat reliable to buy. That's how bad the fleet was of our own trucks back in those days. And I don't know if anybody here knows Bill Wise.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Bill was on the town council at the time.
Oh.
And I can remember because this had to go onto the town council agenda, they had to approve the purchase of that vehicle. And I can remember when it came up for discussion, Bill Wise kind of raised his hand and said, "I have a question for the town manager." And we're, okay, yes, what's that? He says, "If I remember this correctly, this is the 2nd time you've bought this same truck." And so we all laughed, and I said, "Well, yes, it was." And then I said, "Now, is that a wisecrack?" I don't know how I had to be so quick on that one, but we all laughed about that because he was correct. I bought it as a brand new truck, and now I'm buying it as a 7-year-old vehicle. Over the years, here are some of the things some of the events that, especially storm events that I can remember happening. I'm sure many of you, especially if you've lived here for a while, can remember these as well. And the first one that I remember very clearly is the famous ice storm. Okay? And we're from Maine. We're used to winter, we're used to ice. We used to have a storm where ice coats all the trees and the utility lines. Somewhere a branch falls down. Some of us lose power for a couple hours. Power's restored, and we're all back to normal. That's normal, right? Well, this ice storm came in, and we had a 3 or 4 day event where the ice was coming down. It was coating all the branches and all the trees and all the utility lines, and all of Gorham lost its power. We were without power here for about 7 or 8 days. It wasn't just Gorham. I mean, it hit Scarborough. It hit all the way up through, at least up to Augusta. And it was, in the end, it turned out to be a very devastating storm, but a very heartwarming storm for me, because most of us, we're really at our best when there's a crisis as individuals. And some people in that storm in Gorham were out, had the power out for 7 or 8 days. I was fortunate. I got my power back after 3 days. I don't know about some of you, if you were here at the time, and how many of you were out for a couple days. Some of you were out maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 days. But what I found very quickly was that, you know, when you had your power restored, you were calling up your neighbors and saying, I've got power, you need a shower, come on over. You need a hot meal, bring your stuff over, you can use my stove to cook on. And people started looking out for their neighbors and taking care of them and helping them out. We were very lucky because we could have had a hard freeze, really cold, and it had been devastating for everybody without power. The weather kind of stayed warm during that period of time, so we were lucky that way. We actually, my recollection was we were doing much better than most of our neighbors, because we had one of the guys who ran the C&P cruise lived right here in Gorham, and we knew him very well. And so every single morning, we'd sit him down, police department, fire department, public works department, all the folks who were going to be involved in trying to, you know, get the power restored, would all sit there and have a discussion about how they were going to proceed that day, and we could get out and then did very well. I know in places like Wyndham, they had people who were without power for 10 or 15 days. I actually had a very good friend who lived up in Augusta, and he was without power for 21 days. 21 days. And I remember he was a very nice guy, very rational, and he looked at me, he said, yeah, he said, I got to tell you, honestly, he said, I finally lost it on day 20. I feel ashamed of my behavior because I called up C&P and I just let them have it. And he says, and it was wrong. He says, I knew they were doing the best that they could do, but he says, I just lost it, lost my patience. What was really difficult with that storm is we'd go in, we'd clear all the trees and branches out of the way, C&P would then restore the power, and as soon as we were done, the ice was still coming, so another branch would come down and knock that road out. But we were able, because we were organized, we were able to tell people, you know, and with a pretty good idea about when you were going to get your home. So, you know, maybe you'd call up and we'd say, well, where do you live? I'm sorry, it's going to be 3 days at least before you get back there. And maybe it was you'd call up and we'd say, where do you live? Oh, it's probably going to be another 5 or 6 days. But what I found out was if we could give you that kind of an answer, it was okay. It wasn't okay. It was like, I can deal with it.
Now I know.
Yeah.
Now I know, exactly. And what I heard from other communities and other town managers was, how are you doing that? People calling us up here in our community, and we don't know when things are going to be fixed. And those folks would be upset because they didn't know. Should I go up and buy a generator?
Right.
Or whatever. So that made a big difference for us. I had, as a town manager, I had just one person in the entire 7 or 8 days that we were without. I had just one person call me up and say, we pay a lot of taxes in my neighborhood, and I expect you to take the trucks off of her and her neighborhood and get them over here and get us power restored because we pay a lot of taxes. And she didn't like my answer because we were proceeding, we were going to go down a road where we had the most homes and get the most people hooked up as quickly as we could, and that's how we did our work. And if this road here had 20 homes and this one here had 15, we went there first, and then went there second and proceeded down so that the most people could get hooked up just as quickly as we could get them hooked up. So that was the story of the ice storm. It was very famous, and it affected not just Gorham, but affected many other places beyond us. Next came, for me, my recollection was a microburst.
Oh, yeah.
And I gotta say, I'd never even heard of the term. But I can remember clearly from my memory, it was a nice, perfectly sunny day in summertime, probably July, maybe August. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had just finished negotiating with one of my unions on a new contract. And I was there with my finance director, a lady named Shirley Hughes, and we usually would sit down after a meeting and we'd kind of close the door and kind of compare notes. And so we started to do that, and all of a sudden we heard this noise. And neither one of us, we just looked at each other and said, "What's that?" Oh my goodness. And still nice, calm, sunny day. And I looked out into the parking lot over here. The sun was out, not a problem. And I kind of turned back like this, and just out of my legs, all hell broke loose. Really. Just torrential downpour, wind-driven, and we just sat there for 20 minutes with our mouth wide open going, I've never seen anything like this as I can remember. And then it was over within 20 minutes. And you know what? The sun came back out, no wind, it was nice and calm, and I looked out and we didn't have any trees, really many trees, so we just had a lot of leaves down there on the lawn. And I was very naive. I thought, okay, well, that was interesting. End of the day, time to go home. So I hopped in my car and I drove down to the Flag Center. And I turned left to go up Libby Avenue, and I couldn't go anywhere because all the cars were backed up. And I got out of the car and I asked him, I said, what's wrong here? He says, well, there are multiple trees down all over the road. Nobody can get through. So I found out later on just how devastating it was. Many of you may be able to remember Roby Park over there. We had a thriving forest over there. Most of that forest got wiped out. All the trees were down. The property out in back of the Narragansett School, that field, we had huge swaths of trees that were blown down there. I know somebody who lived up on, I think, Finney Street, he lost 20 or 30 trees in his yard. And we found out later on that it was a microburst, and it's like, so that was the first time ever in my life I can ever remember hearing the term microburst. So, and we spent a lot of time cleaning up a lot of trees on public property, and a lot of individuals cleaned up trees on their property as well. If I remember correctly, we actually had a home out here on Fort Hill Road that was kind of blown off its foundation a little bit. Not a long way, but like moved 6 or 10 inches off its foundation from that storm. And since then, we've had 2 additional microbursts in Gorham, plus 1 tornado. If you think about that, in the 24 years I was here, 4 of those kind of storms. And if I understand correctly, the major difference really between a tornado and a microburst is the tornado actually touches the ground. The cloud does. A microburst doesn't. Other than that, that's pretty much the same kind of storm. And in every case, we've had swaths of forest that have just been laid down flat. I guess that's kind of the new reality. If we've had that many, I think we'll continue to have more. So the next thing I remember, and to me it's probably the most devastating storm that we had here in Gorham all the time I've been here. And to me it was I called it the big rain event. And that occurred, I think, in October of 2001. And I remember that because my son was a freshman in high school, and I would drive him to school every morning. And so it was an October day, and he and I just put him in the car, and I'm backing the car out of the garage and out of the driveway, when my wife comes down and running up wood, like this. And you know, it's raining, it's hot, but it's a rainstorm. So I rolled down the window, she said, "They just called off school." And I looked at her and I go, "It's a rainstorm." It's just a rainstorm. Since when do they start calling off school? Because it's just a rainstorm. And of course my son was grinning from ear to ear. And I said, "Well, okay. Get out of the car, I'm off to work." So I'd go to work by 6:45 every morning. And I got to my office and I sat down, and I probably was there for 30 minutes. And my public works director came in and sat down and says, "We're in trouble." And I go, "Well, what do you mean we're in trouble?" "It's rain." "You tell me my road grader caught fire, or somebody got into an accident with a dump truck? What's the problem here?" And he says, "In the last 10 minutes, every single ditch in Gorham is filled up and is overflowing. Many of the roads in Gorham are already being overtopped with water running over them. And it's like, oh, this is the new reality." And then a few minutes later, the superintendent of schools, Tim McCormick, came down, and we all sat down. He says, "I've got a problem." He says, "We got some of our students who made it to school before we could call school off, and we don't know how to get them home." And so we all sat there and tried to figure out, how do we get them home in a manner that's safe? And of course, the rain just kept coming. And we eventually I got all those students home by kind of sending a public works pickup truck in front of the school bus. And we got to a road with a little bit of water on it, we'd send the pickup truck through to make sure it was safe and everything, and then have the bus come through, and we eventually got all of the children delivered home safely. Now, in that rainstorm, and it really was supposed to have just been a heavy, brief rainstorm. Everybody got it wrong, the weatherman got it really wrong. And what happened is this cloud came and just stopped over Scarborough and Gorham, pretty much. So normally it would come, go through, drop a lot of rain and keep going, and this one stopped. And we received, I believe, 18.65 inches of rain in a 24-hour period of time. Now, at that point in time, I remember my engineer telling me that a rainstorm that dropped 5.6, 5.7 inches of rain in 24 hours is a 100-year storm event.
Oh my God.
So that's a storm event that would happen once every 100 years. This storm with 18.65 inches, I was advised was a 300-year storm event, an event that happens in theory once every 300 years. Every single road in Gorham sustained damage. We did not have a single road anywhere that had no damage. Now, the best one would be like Main Street, where Main Street was intact, but some of the, the side of the road was washed out. We had a couple roads like that. So we were able to get people in and out of town, but many of our roads just flat out washed out. I don't know if you know what we call a big arch culvert. A big arch culvert would be this, which would be a culvert, which would be maybe 12 feet high. So think of me as roughly 6 feet. So it would be one that would be twice as high as I am, twice as wide. It's kind of really a bridge, but it's a culvert rather than concrete. We had a number of those. And this storm just washed out the top of the road, and you lifted those up and moved them downstream. So we had bridges that were washed out, and it took us, I think, we got the last road fixed just about a year later, and that was that big ash culvert that was out on Hudson Road. And it got fixed last because at least down there, people could come in from this side and get to their homes, and people could come in from this side and get to their homes. It was very inconvenient for people who lived down there to not be able to go through, but they could at least get home. And we had other roads that we had to fix them just so that in some cases people could get back to their homes. Over in Scarborough, I remember somebody where Scarborough had blocked off the road, put up barriers, and said it's not safe to go through here. Somebody tried to go through and ended up dying because they drowned.
Oh,
Make no mistake about that, we had multiple people in Gorham who drove around barriers that we had because they wanted to get home, and they said, oh, I can make it. I can make it through that road. And fortunately for us, I don't think we had any fatalities. We did have numerous people who went down and got into trouble, and we had to go get them out. We were able to do that, in our case, successfully. But that was probably the single most expensive single storm with the greatest amount of damage that I can remember here in all the time that I was here. So I don't know if any of you remember that storm?
well, that wasn't it in the fall? I think that was, we moved here in October 20 years
Yeah.
ago. So I think I think that huge storm happened in September, and we
Probably.
arrived, and
Yeah.
the guy whose house we bought said, you have to be really careful. There's a lot of roads, and we had a big storm, and
Exactly, yeah.
just
Yeah.
barely.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting. It was a very interesting storm. Hopefully we don't have something like that for many, many years to come. I'm not confident anymore when we talk about 100-year storm events or 300-year storm events. I'm not really, I mean, the weather's changing. So we've had certainly, in the time I've here, I would count 5 or 6 100-year storm event storms. So I don't think they happen once every 100 years anymore.
The Patriots Day storm. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. We started probably 10 or 15 years ago in the town recognizing that we were having these events more often, so we started doing things like buying huge generators that would help to heat our buildings, you know, and keep them operating, particularly the emergency centers or schools, in case we needed to evacuate people and get them to places where they need to be warm. We just assume we will start having more of those kind of storms to take care of. Some of the other things I'd like to talk about here over my time. Some town improvements. Many of you may remember the first one really occurred, well, back in 1999, we did a very extensive study to look at town facilities and what kind of things we needed to do to upgrade our facilities. And then right after that, we started kind of in a methodical way, matching our way through those things. So the first thing we did was in 1999, we went and built the new Public Works garage. And if anybody's ever been up to our Public Works facility over the years, the old Public Works garage, which is down front of where the new one is, and that was the Public Works garage for many years. And what was happening to us was, of course, with all our old dump trucks, they'd break down during the storm. And so we'd kind of have to pull them in off the road, we'd pull them up to the Public Works garage, and they, with the plow, couldn't even get inside the Public Works garage. So imagine being a mechanic in the middle of a storm, and having to go outside in the middle of a storm and work and try to fix that truck so we could get back out on the road and plow the roads. Those are the kind of conditions that they were working in. And my mechanic, Dave Lamprin, he kept telling me, he says, we'll never build a new Public Works garage here. And I said, yeah, I think we will. He says, no, we won't. He says, it just won't happen. And so I think the day after we opened the new Public Works garage, I said, and I said, so what do you think now? You think we'll build a new Public Works garage? He said, yeah, okay, we will. The next thing that happened was we expanded Baxter Memorial Library in 2004. And I believe, if my memory's correct, that same year we also opened the new middle school, which is located over in Weeks Road.
Oh, yeah.
So we did a fundraiser for Baxter Memorial Library and actually raised about around $800,000, which partially paid for that through the fundraising effort. And the other part was paid for with property taxes. The new middle school, of course, would be a combination of both state funded and town funded. But that new middle school was the first school in the state of Maine to be heated with geothermal heat. And the state, I remember the state said, we're not going to help pay for that. We don't know anything about it. So that's all in your nickel. And now, of course, because Gorham kind of pioneered that, they recognize that and consider that a very innovative and cost-effective way for new public buildings to be heated. So there are a lot of new schools since then that have been heated, that are having geothermal heat installed, including the new elementary school that we built later on out in the Great Falls Elementary School, which is out off of 237. Okay, so I think we can all be pretty proud of that, being willing to, try new technology and see how it works. Like everything, I kind of remember the first year as they were moving kids into the school, it took a while for everybody to kind of figure out how to, what they call, balance the rooms. And if I'm not a technician, so I remember there were a lot of complaints because balancing basically means we got a heating system, we're going to go get it all balanced for the entire building. But a week later, they'd bring on a new room out there. They were still fixing it even though children were there, and that would throw the balance out. So they just get it kind of rebalanced, and then a week later, there'd be children over here who would be sitting there with winter jackets on because it's too cold, and over here they're opening the windows because it's too hot. Then they'd go in and rebalance the system again, and then a week later they'd bring on another room.
Oh dear.
So some parents were complaining a little bit during the first year, and while that process worked its way out, but in the long run I think it's proven to be a very good source of technology. Then in 2006, we opened the new municipal center. We went back to the Shaw School and renovated that building into what is now the new municipal center. And we got off to a bit of a fit and start, I'd say, on that project, because originally we were going to tear down 2/3 of that building. I don't know if any of you know, but that building was really built over 30 or 40 years in 3 different sections. And so when we first looked at that project, our initial plan at the time was we were going to build a large municipal center right where the police and fire station are. We were going to stay there where we were and combine that into a large building. And so the Shaw School, we were going to tear down the 2 oldest parts of the building and keep the area where the gym was for recreational purposes. And the voters actually approved that. And then the bids on the work came in way too high. And the town council sat there and said, when we thought the project was going to cost this, we thought that was a good deal. But now that we know it's going to cost something else, we don't think that's such a good deal. And so we swallowed our pride and went back to the voters and said, we really think now it's worth it to save the entire building. It's going to cost more money, and will you voters, approve that project? And the voters did. And so we renovated the entire building and moved in December of 2006. And for the next year and a half, I'd have people who would open the door to my office, stick their head in, and say, I had science class here. And Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so was my teacher. And I'd always look at them in as solemn a voice as I could muster, I would say, oh, well, we found some graffiti here. Was that about you? And I'd get some amazing answers. Like, well, it might have been. So we got a lot of positive feedback about that. And that building has just been a wonderful building for us ever since we moved in. I had people coming from other municipalities who said, can we tour your building, because we're thinking about building a new municipal center in that town. We'd like to see some of the things that you did here. So we had people who would come in and look at our building for a number of years and take away some ideas that we did in our building. For us, we just needed the extra room. And up on the second floor, of course, we not only moved the municipal operations in there, but up on the second floor was the superintendent's schools and all of their operations as well. So it worked very, very well for them as well as the town side of this equation here. Then the big project, and something that was probably the most important project for the town of Gorham. So that came in 2008, and that was the Gorham bypass. And the Gorham bypass was a culmination of 55 years of effort. There were 16 different studies in which the Gorham bypass was a major component of that study. And all the time I've been here, the Gorham Town Council every year would say getting that thing done is the #1 priority for the town of Gorham. And I used to, people would come in to me and say, are we ever going to get that road? And I would sit there with a little bit of a laugh on my face, and I'd say, I am promising you that that will be built in my lifetime. But I plan to live a long time. In the end, well, I can remember as we were approaching the time when we were going to actually get that under construction, that Burley Lovett, I don't know if people know Burley Lovett here. Burley was on the town council. Mike Finney, Rosie's son, Mike was on the town council. And I all hopped in a plane and we flew down to Washington, D.C. And we spent the day meeting with Congressman Tom Allen,
Oh, wow.
Senator Olympia Snowe, and Senator Susan Collins. And we said, this project is ready to go. We need a lot of money, and can you get that money for us? And in the end, and at the time, we said, we need about $25 million, if you can find that somewhere. And then we got updated pricing, and we needed more than that. And that congressional delegation came through first. They not only got the $25 million, but they were able to get the additional amount of money that they were being told would be needed to do that project. And it was built, and it opened, I believe, somewhere in the fall of 2008. And it had an immediate impact on downtown, where, it just decongested, moved a lot of the cars out of downtown. I had people coming up to me. I had one lady came up to me and said, we live right there in the village. And the traffic is just so bad, before. And last night, my husband went outside and stood in the middle of the road at 10 o'clock at night, just to prove he could do it. I go, okay, that's great. Not a good idea, but, that's good feedback. I appreciate the feedback. And so that wasn't, it really wasn't, and here's the other thing I want to say. When I say 55 years, that bypass first shows up in a document for the town of Gorham in a 1960 comprehensive plan.
Wow.
Okay? And we built it in 2008
Took a while.
Wow.
after 16 different studies. So the other thing I want to hear is think about the amount of money that was spent on those 16 different studies. And guess where we put this bypass? In almost the exact same location that it was drawn in that 1960 master plan before we had any of those studies done. And that was, I think that was, remember Bernard Rhines?
Yes.
So Bernard was a wonderful person. And I think Bernard was the one who figured out where that road should have gone back in 1960. And that's why ultimately, Bernie was just so focused on still trying to get that road built. I don't know if we'd have had it built without his ability to stay focused on that. And that's a major reason why it's now called the Bernard P. Rhines bypass, because he was such an important person in trying to get that done for us. So that's how the bypass came about, and we're still trying to get the rest of the road built now, which will be probably an equally difficult task. Some of the things on Main Street I want to talk about. When I came here in 1994, Main Street through Gorham Village was mostly gasoline stations. We had a number of gasoline stations there. We had some restaurants. Sidewalks were kind of cracked and broken if we had them. Really wasn't an attractive place in Gorham Village. Then around 2000, the town adopted a new master plan for Gorham Village. And what happens with master plans, things began to happen over a period of time. It's not like this tidal wave that washes over where we suddenly have something brand new occur. What happens is businesses come in, they want to do projects, and over the course of a number of years, the master plan slowly gets put into place. So what has happened, if you think about it, and some of you may remember this better than I can, those gasoline stations slowly disappeared. Rite Aid came in and built a new building. When they did that, they eliminated one of the gas stations that were there. Cumberland Farms says, oh, we're going to do update our building. And we say, great, it's got to look a little bit like this. So there begins to be a common theme of kind of an old New England village setting that develops. We have banks like Key Bank, Norway Savings, TD Bank. They all come in and do brand new buildings with similar kinds of themes. How many can remember the post office? Used to be there on the side of Gorham Savings Bank. They move off of Main Street and go over to their current location over on Railroad Avenue. Can people remember Hanford updated their building? And they were there before, but they decided to update and expand their building and stay on Main Street. I can remember doing that. I can remember the grand opening ceremony when they proudly let everybody come in through the building, into their doors. And our sidewalks have slowly been rebuilt over the years, including, and for those of you who might have tried to navigate that old brick sidewalk, right there at the intersection of 114 and 25. It's kind of like taking your life in your hands, Yeah, can I walk through there without breaking my ankle? Because the bricks, kind of, go like this with the frost over time. I'm not sure why the town ever put those in originally. About probably 5 or 6 or 7 years ago now, we were able to get those out of there and put them in with new concrete sidewalks as well. So if you step back now and you took a look at Main Street, it would look just so much dramatically different and so much better than it would have back in 1994 when I came here. And we've had people who have mentioned that to me many times over the years. The last big thing was what I call the old C&M Brown gas station. It was there for many years, and it was probably the single thing that people complained to me most about for about 5 years while everybody was trying to deal with that, and people wanted the town to just go get rid of it, and you'd say, well, this is private property. We can't just go and say, no, get rid of it. Everybody has their rights, and we have due process. And I think really it's going to change on its own anyway. And unfortunately, John Smith came in and bought that property and that building, and a couple of years ago put in a nice building to replace that. So that was the big thing. It's kind of like going, oh, thank God, this is done. The eyesore is out of there, and John will do a nice job. And John did. He went in and did a wonderful job with his building. So those are the kind of changes that I remember on Main Street. But there is one other thing, and most people may not remember this. For many years after I came here, whenever we had a heavy rainstorm, and right after the rainstorm, if you went to the intersection where Mechanic Street, New Portland Road, and Main Street was, there'd be this massive puddle. And the puddle would be about 10 inches deep.
Oh,
And you'd come up to the intersection, you'd go, I hope it's not leaking in my car.
wow.
You know, is my car gonna stall? I guess not. And you'd most people were able to navigate out through there, and it's just because the drainage system in the road had become overloaded and needed to be fixed. So when Hannaford went in and did their project and upgraded their store, the town said, great, this is our chance. And we went in and fixed the drainage system there. And of course, that totally eliminated that problem. So
Oh, I don't.
whenever you have a rainstorm, if you drive up through there and there's no problem, remember there's a reason why there's no problem here. But that was just one of those things where every year, well, not every year, but numerous times a year, you'd have that, and it'd be there for about a day before the water would slowly drain out through the system. So, a couple other things I want to talk about. I mentioned population growth, but let me just go through the numbers here a little bit for you. Population was about 11,500 when I came here in 1994. By 2000, over a 10-year period, the population in Gorham had increased to 14,141. So that was a 22% increase in the population from 1990 to 2000. Just think about that for a second. And then from 2000 to 2010, the population increased to 16,381. That was another 16% increase that occurred there. And then from 2010 to 2014, that 4-year period of time, the Census Bureau said that Gorham was the fastest growing community in Maine. And when I left, I think the population, we estimated the population was about 16,800. My best guess right now is the population would be over 17,000 right now. And in 2010, when we had that additional 16% increase in population growth, the town of Gorham overtook the city of Waterville, and we became the 15th largest community in Maine based on that census. Okay? So
We're bigger than Waterville?
we are, yeah.
Wow.
Yep. So the good news is, because people will often over the years would say we're growing too fast, we got to stop this. And I would tell them that, in real life, no community just stands still. It never. You can grow, you can shrink. You can't just stand still. It doesn't work. It never happens in real life that way. And as difficult sometimes as it is for us to deal with the change of having things grow, having fields turn into subdivisions, and some of the things that we might have loved about Gorham, the alternative, meaning that we're shrinking and declining, is a lot worse. And if you think about many communities out in the Midwest, where factories have left town, and that's devastating. Or if you go to Millinocket, Maine, I drove through Millinocket a couple of years ago, and it just broke my heart. I mean, I was a town manager up in Lincoln for a number of years early in my career. Back then, Millinocket was a thriving community. You'd look at that and kind of, and be envious of how well it was doing. And I drove through town here, and I remember going by a building up there that was structurally very sound. So it was still a pretty nice building. And there was a sale, for sale sign on it, and it said, price reduced. $21,500. $21,500. And I looked at that building and said, that would be a $200,000 home in Gorham. And I just thought about people who own that and how their value and their value and their worth had just shrunk because of a situation like that, you know, for them. And that's what happens when communities go the other way. So I try to encourage people, you know, if you want change, you know, be involved in a positive way and stay involved because you can help how Gorham changes, but you can't just go and say, we're just going to stop it and have it stay forever the way it is. So the good things happen. Bad things happen too with change. We have a lot fewer dairy farms than when I came here. And there are a lot of reasons why that's occurring. And I think a lot of us would be nostalgic for that situation because a lot of us, I grew up in Maine, I'm from Maine. I'm from Mount Desert Island. My wife is from Aroostook County, and her dad was a potato farmer, one of them there, potato farmers. Her grandfather was a potato farmer, and she would tell you that when she grew up, she's from Eastern Maine, which is just outside of Presque Isle. Sort of between Presque Isle and Fort Fairfield. And she would say, when I was growing up, we would have 200 farms in operation in Easton. And she says, now we have about 2. But the farm in the same amount of acres as those 200 farmers did. So that's a community that's actually doing quite well up there. They are. Not all of Aroostook County is, but they are, but it's still a pretty wrenching change for a community who goes through something like that as well. So the last thing I just want to quickly touch upon, and I'd love to answer questions that you may have or share memories if you have some memories, so you know, please feel free to ask me that here. Just a couple of quick things with respect to the changes I went through in my own work office. When I started in this business, of course, I was still adding stuff up in long columns with an adding machine. We then had something called a computer, and we had a mainframe computer. And I remember buying a brand new mainframe computer with, I think, something called 60 megabytes. And being told that that thing's going to last me forever. And being so proud that we had a computer that would last us forever. Tells you how naive I was. Because I think about 2 years later they had to go expand that one to then having what we call personal computers put on each desk. Each one of those personal computers had more computing power than that mainframe that I was so proud of. And computers, you know, just made things like budgeting so much easier. You know, I would sit there before that with the calculator, add up long columns this way and this way to make sure they balanced, and I'd always be off $1.20. So here I am on a $5 million budget trying to find $1.20 because I would not go back to the town council and say, oh, there's $1.20 somewhere here that I can't find. I'd have to say, no, it works. So computers made that kind of stuff really easy. And then, a few years ago, came this incredible new technology called a fax machine. Now, a fax machine, what really made that so great was I could actually do a transaction in one day. Before that, I'd have something going on, I'd sign some documents, I'd put them in the mail, I'd mail them over to our attorney, and then a few days later, they'd arrive back in my office. So it was 3 or 4 days to get a transaction done. I could now go to my fax machine and send it off to him, and he could sign it and do something and tell me what was wrong, whatever, and get it back, and I could complete a transaction in one day. What a remarkable achievement that was, you know. And I'm just getting comfortable, fine, with this fax machine. And when my secretary or my assistant said, fax, that's so old fashioned. No, we just do an attachment to an email. Oh my God. I can't use a fax machine anymore because everybody's gonna think I'm a dinosaur. So that was kind of the progression of those kind of transactions. I kind of forgot, by the way, email. Talk about something that was a devastating change for me. I remember when we basically got email, and we started using that, and I looked at my assistant and I said, okay, I guess I have to go use email. I'll look at it once a day, I promise, I'll faithfully do that. But I am not gonna send an email to one of my department managers. I'm not gonna send an email to my police chief. I can walk down the hall and talk to him. I will never do that. And that probably lasted 6 months before now I'm overwhelmed. And I have to look at my email 4 or 5 times a day. You know, my police chief is emailing me. I'm not sure if it's because he did not want to talk to me or what. And I have to respond. And it was just a whole new way of doing things. Again, that allowed business to speed up. Like most change, there's the downside to that because I preferred, and still do, to be able to look somebody in the eye and have a discussion and talk to them. It's, for me, so much easier and it's so much better when you communicate in that way than to do something with a message. So I've been a reluctant convert, and I've been, on all these changes, I was literally dragged there on every one of these changes. And then I would tell you, the most evil thing I ever did in my life, and when I really converted to the dark side, was the day that I came into work and said, okay, I have a cell phone. I felt absolutely awful. I held out until really about the last couple of years when even my town council members were saying, you really need to get a cell phone. And I finally said, okay, I'll get a cell phone. And I can remember, and this is probably only about, really a couple of years ago, I'm in my office, I'm having this meeting with a few other folks from outside, and we're there, and this cell phone starts ringing. And I'm sitting there, calmly looking at everybody to say, okay, who's the offending party? And I'm looking around, waiting, and finally everybody says, it's not me. It's not me. It's not me, and it's like, oh my goodness, where's my cell phone? So I go up, and so, it's me. And I shut it off, and I go back, sit down, and I have to listen to one of them with a big grin on his face says, is that your first call? And I said, no. It was my third one. So that was my experience with cell phones. I would say my observations about technology, it's allowed us to do incredibly wonderful things. We have automatic defibrillators now that we never had. So if you have one of those, either somebody like me could, somebody here is having a serious cardio event, I could pull those off the wall and hook it up and save your life probably doing that. We have cameras that can look inside of a burning building and say, I've got a firefighter right there. We've got to get that firefighter out. We have drones. We're already using drones.
In Gorham?
In Gorham.
Well, there've been some pictures in the paper, somebody.
Yeah, we're using drones both for just collection of information, but we've also had some rescues where we've had somebody stuck on an island where we had to send a drone over to kind of figure out what it is. That gave us the information we need to be able to go effect a rescue. And there are just numerous things like that. So It's doing wonderful things for us. It's changing our lives. It's also coming at great expense. A lot of these changes cost a lot of money. Defibrillators, because the technology improves every couple of years, you spend a lot of money, and used to be years ago, you'd say, good, that's gonna last us 10 years. And now, instead of spending a lot of money and having it last us 10 years, we spend a lot of money, and then maybe 3 years, we'll go spend a lot more money to replace it with something that's newer and better. So, it kind of comes with the good and the bad. Overall, I think it's probably better for us, despite my reluctance to live with the new technology. But I think we're here for the long haul, and change is just going to continue to go. So when we first had computers, I used to rely on my wife to stay up with all the stuff. And,
Not your children?
Lynn, my children. Yeah. So I'll close with this one last thing, and then please, if you have questions, I'd love to answer questions, share memories. But I finally realized, what is happening with the younger generation, because my daughter's in college. She's home for the summer, and I come into her room, she's sitting on the couch, and I look at my daughter, and she's giggling. And then she goes, and then she giggles again. And she goes, and then she giggles again. And I'm going, Aaron, what are you doing? She says, well, I'm talking to John. And when you're talking to John, okay, where's John? He's in San Francisco. Oh, so you're having a conversation right now with somebody in San Francisco? She says, yeah. Giggle, giggle. Well, it must be funny. And it's like, oh my goodness. My daughter's doing this. Talking right now, almost live, but really through a computer. But it's instantaneous with somebody who's in San Francisco. And if she's doing that, everybody younger than her are certainly doing that. So what I found, and I think really is a problem that's going to grow, if you think about it for a second, we all grew up talking face-to-face with people. And think about how much communication really is about what I would call nonverbal communication. It's the tone you use when you say something. We can say the same words, and they can mean different things, depending on how we say it. It's your body language. Are you scowling when you say something? That might tell me you're angry at me. Or are you smiling when you say something? That might tell me that you're pretty happy about things. But it's all those other nonverbal communications that we pick up that are extremely important to our communications. And what I found numerous times with younger people who are doing a lot less of that nowadays is that they will say something and it will have a devastating impact on somebody that they said it, because they just don't understand. They don't get all those nuances about communication. And they'll say something they mean well, and they just insulted somebody just because they don't understand it. And I think we're probably going to have that kind of problem grow more and more as this technology allows people to communicate a lot easier without having to actually sit down and talk to them face to face. I think that's one of the things that we're really losing nowadays, and it's going to be a bigger problem. So, with that, I'm going to stop there. I'd love to get questions about this or anything about the town. I'd be very happy to try to answer those for you.